Flux Kontext has gone open source, and so today I'm going to help you get started using Flux Kontext open source inside of your Comfy UI workflows, provide all the resources I found in the description below, and also a kind of quick start workflow available for you guys. First and foremost, we're going to make this a very quick, no BS video. All the documentation that I am going over is available in the description below, so we're just going to move through it very quickly. I'll touch on the big things, starting with the licensing. This model uses a Flux Dev non-commercial license, meaning we're not getting the benefits that we do with the Apache license. So this means it cannot be used in a deployable state, which unfortunately I think is kind of backwards. So something to keep in mind here if you were planning on using this in a business environment. Of course, the models are also available via a bunch of APIs, but why would you want to do that now? One thing to keep in mind is that Fall AI has integrated the open source versions of these models, meaning that it is now cheaper. So also something to keep in mind if you don't really care about Comfy UI integration, especially with the non-commercial license up here. Another thing to keep in mind is the requirements to actually run these models, but don't worry, I have a solution for you. So the full model is actually pretty hefty. Looks like you'll need at least 80 gigabytes of VRAM, or at a minimum 32. But quantized versions have already been released, and that's what we're actually going to talk about today. And again, the link to that is in the description. So this is the main Hugging Face repo for the Flux Kontext Dev full model. And if we look at it, it's 23.8 gigs. So kind of implies how many resources you actually need to run the full model. And so what I found is a Flux Kontext GGUF repo, also on Hugging Face. They have everything from Q2 all the way to the 16-bit full model. I have tested Q5 and Q2, so the results that we'll be looking at today are from the Q5 model. Note that this is all running on 8 gigabytes of VRAM with the Q5 model, and this is our source image here. When we go across to see our Flux Kontext image, you can see that it does a pretty good job, especially for being a Q5 model. And one thing I want to point out is you might say, well, that looks pretty plastic in regard to the skin, and you'd be right, but I think this is also something we saw when Flux Kontext was pushed through the Comfy UI API node. I was seeing very similar results. But again, also to keep in mind that this is a quantized version of the model and a pretty low quant level as well. So with the full model, or with maybe a higher quantized model, we'd likely see even closer results, even better generation on the skin. So just something to keep in mind that the higher quantization you can go, the better. But obviously it's a battle between quality and generation speed. So shameless plug, we actually have fixed this problem with a workflow we've talked about many times, our skin refiner workflow. So we can see our original image underneath, and as we go across, the new image while still maintaining all the main features. So that's just an option to fix your images if you'd like. It's available on our Patreon, and this Flux Kontext quick start workflow is also available on our Patreon to free members. And really quickly going through it, just so you guys can understand how it works, you upload your image, you select your aspect ratio. If you want to use the original aspect ratio, you just change this to custom. Original as in your original image size. The Flux Kontext model also supports LoRa stacks, which is nice. So I've chosen to add that in here. Would be curious how you guys kind of deal with this. Then the rest is pretty standard. You've got your clip, your prompt, your guidance, your K-samplers, your latent image. I've added Tcache in here to make things move a little bit quicker. The Q5 model does work on 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but obviously with Tcache it moves a little bit quicker, and I haven't noticed any quality loss. And so aside from the main GGUF model, you may be wondering, well, like what other settings do I need? Well, if you've run Flux models before, it's pretty much all the same. For your clips, you have your T5 XXL, FP8 or FP16, clip L set to Flux type, conditioning between 2.5 and 3, though I noticed if you go up to 3, you get some weird results. So I'd be interested to hear anyone testing with this. Typical Euler, simple scheduler, can mess with your steps. I also got some weird results if I set this to like 0.8. So also curious if anyone does denoise testing. Obviously, Flux Kontext now being open source opens the door for integrating masking. So maybe denoise would be a valuable tool there. And yeah, that's it. It's pretty straightforward. We also have a multi-image version if you guys want to mess around with it. This is literally the exact same as we talked about in our last video with the API node. You just stitch the images together and pass it as one. one. Although if you do that, you'll see that the generation is not necessarily what you're looking for. So this is probably something that you guys can fiddle around with a little bit more to actually combine images, and I'm sure within like 24 hours of this video being posted, we'll already have that. But one thing I also did want to mention is the kind of quality of the generated image, and this could be just due to the generation in general and the fact that it generated a split image. Like if this full image was the girl and we didn't have this image up top, odds are these glasses would be a little bit better. But I still think it's just something worth noting, I guess, that this doesn't completely work yet, but I figured I can provide it out there and you guys can build off of it if you want. And obviously when I do solve this or find somebody that does, I'll be sure to update you guys in our Patreon community chat. So if you're not a member, I would highly suggest joining us. I think in like 2 weeks we're up to already almost 200 members, so thank you guys. It's really awesome to see that you're loving the content. Overall, really cool. Everything you need to run Flux Kontext locally on your machine and all the resources we've talked about today are in the description. You can find this workflow for a quick start on our Patreon, and that's about it. It's actually surprisingly simple. There's really not too much to the generation process, which is great. And of course, if you guys have any questions, as always, feel free to leave a comment. I'll talk to you guys later.